Hello and welcome to the Irish NFL Show review of Week 13 of NFL action. My name is Shane Brennan. Tonight I'm joined by Brian O'Leary, Noel Dowling, and you won't see him on screen now, but he'll be joining later on, Kieran Boyle, as we take a look back at some of the twists and turns. Week 13 meant it was definitely unlucky for some. It was certainly the case for a couple of teams who managed to lose in some very tight situations. Has anybody checked in Justin Tucker, by the way? He definitely felt like he had a very unlucky performance. We'll be touching on the result between the Eagles and the Ravens in due course. First tonight, though, I'd like to remind everybody that this coming Sunday, the 8th of December, is the New York Jets' first ever official watch party in Ireland. We are proud to be involved in the event. We're looking forward to seeing you, whether you're a Jets fan or otherwise. They're playing against the Dolphins, kicking off at 6 p.m. on Sunday, but the party will be on a little bit earlier from that. If you are interested, please check out our social pages or our website if you wish to be in attendance. Tonight's show is brought to you by QuinnBet. And Noel, I'm going to start off with you first, and with my traditional betting pun. If you were to bet at the start of the year that the Eagles would be as strong as they have been, and the Niners would end up being the team in the NFC to completely fall by the wayside, I would imagine you would have got pretty good odds. And the part of that probably would have surprised me more is how strong this Eagles team has been. They really came up big in the second half. We see every week how good Saquon Barkley keeps moving on. We see the defense keeps moving from strength to strength. They're on a hot winning streak now, sitting at 10-2, I believe, nicely comfortable on top of the NFC East. We'll talk a little bit about the Ravens and one or two aspects of their game, and the fact that, as I mentioned at the start of the program, that Justin Tucker isn't having a good go of it. But this Eagles team, and for all that we talk about Nick Sirianni and all that we talk about elements of their play to not be able to convert things, they are really, really motoring strong. And the part about them, which is impressing most, particularly in the second half, I think, is the way that Jalen Hurts is really mobilizing his offense.
Yeah, look, this is an Eagles team that have a lot of talent. But you're right, coming into the season, we obviously saw the way last season went, and there were definitely question marks there. They obviously make changes at both coordinator positions, which really seem to have been working in the way they had hoped it would do. Saquon Barkley, you mentioned, comes in, and this is an Eagles team that had all the potential to do what they're doing now. But again, it was just the question marks on could they do it. But you mentioned Jalen Hurts. He's having a fantastic season. If he's not passing for touchdowns, he's pushing it in. They're just making every play count with him. But Saquon Barkley feels like he's being that one dimension that's really pushed this team into that kind of new era of really being able to challenge the Lions and potentially the Chiefs and other teams from the AFC. And yeah, I mean, look, this is a team now at the moment that you'd be hard pressed to bet against. I still do fancy the Lions as the best team in the NFC, but I think the Eagles are absolutely making the case for being that second team that could absolutely challenge them going forward. And yeah, I mean, last night is just it's another game where they go against a Ravens team who have a really, really good offense, who very rarely score under 20 points. But this Eagles defense keeps this Ravens team under 20 points. We look at what the Ravens have in Jackson and Henry in that running game, and the Eagles did enough just to not let them take control of the game. And then they use their offensive weapons to do what needed to be done. So look, they're definitely a team now who people need to worry about, keep an eye on, and going forward, you'd be a brave man to bet against them being able to go all the way in the NFC.
Big fan.
Brian, what's interesting with the Eagles, and certainly the way that they've Brian, what's interesting about the Eagles and the way that they have developed into the season is, I think, as you were about to allude to, the way that they've been playing defensively. You look at the list of scores they've been able to keep their opponents to in the months of October and November and now into December. Only once have they conceded more than 20 points. That was 23 points to the Jaguars it was in Philly a few weeks ago. You look at some of the score lines. They managed to keep the Ravens to under 20. They kept the Commanders quiet. They kept the Bengals quiet, which, as we mentioned last night, isn't no mean feat in itself. There's a lot of areas here where, and I know other people who've been on the show before may not always be the biggest fan of Vic Fangio's abilities, and we're alluding to Colin there, who obviously saw it firsthand in what went on in Denver. But you have to say, no, it's not only about scheme, and we saw that in the way that he was able to mark guys, but I think in confidence in their abilities as well. There is a lot to like about what's going on in the Philly defense.
Yeah, Colin wasn't a fan of Vic Fangio, but I think that was more of a head coaching style within Denver as opposed to what he was as a defensive coordinator. I mean, he's well received around the league as a really strong defensive coordinator. Had his 1 year in Miami. It's these in-game adjustments we're seeing in particular that's really been effective over the course of the last few weeks. Like they're down 9-0, obviously 10-0, you could argue, if he kicks an extra point, but it was a very bad day for normally a very solid kicker in Justin Tucker. The Rams game last week, the first two drives, the Rams went up and down the field, and I mean, you were thinking this is going to be a real shootout type of game. And then quickly Jay adjusted. You talk about that Jacksonville game, 22 points. Well, actually, a touchdown within that was actually a fumble on the offensive side that was returned for a touchdown by the Jags defense. So you could argue their defense held them to 15 points in that game as well. This is what we're seeing. And as much as Saquon Barkley, don't get me wrong, he's having a fantastic season. He's right to be called out as an MVP. Yes, again, yesterday he seems to find a way in the third, fourth quarter to get that killer punch, killer touchdown that puts the game away. It was the same yesterday. Probably wasn't at the same level of, I suppose, performance that we've seen over the course of the last few weeks with the Washington game and the game in SoFi last week. But again, yesterday didn't really go according to plan for a long part of that game offensively. They were struggling in large parts, and it looked like the Ravens were the team that defensively were going to dominate the game. But over the course of the four quarters, they took control, and even towards the end, I don't think anybody had any sense. Like time and time again, the Ravens were moving the ball reasonably well, but they were never getting themselves in a killer position to score touchdowns. They were withstanding everything that the Ravens could throw at them, leading the missed field goals all day long. And you look at the numbers, Mark Andrews started strong, tailed off over the course of the game. Likely he didn't have one reception until the fourth quarter. I know he's a second string tight end, really, to Mark Andrews. Zay Flowers only had 3 catches in the game. They completely dominated defensively, and you're allowing the Ravens team to be kicking field goals. You could argue if the Ravens kick those field goals, they're in the game. It's a lot tighter. But you went to Baltimore, you can hold them down to field goals all day long. You're doing something right, and it's a big win. It's a big win for this team and for the Ravens team. They are now 2 games back, and you're probably going to jump into the Steelers in all likelihood now, Shane. But this. Excuse me. Yesterday we spoke about it when me and Noel previewed on Friday. This was going to make or break weekend in the AFC North, because I know Noel went for the Steelers. I selected the Bengals. I thought the Steelers wouldn't be able to live with the Bengals offensively. They very much did. But now all of a sudden the Ravens are 2 games back. And if the Broncos win tonight, they're on the exact same record. This is a team that everybody thought was a worthy favourites to be in the AFC Championship game. Right now, you could argue that's not going to be the case.
You were talking earlier about Saquon Barkley and surely his bid to be the MVP. And personally, I'd definitely like to see a running back for the MVP. I think he's definitely playing well enough to do it in terms of his ability to purely change the game. But it's very difficult to look past Josh Allen, particularly in some of the performances he's been putting in Buffalo. I've made the case for all the way throughout the season that what the Buffalo offense needed was to be able to show some form of consistency and not only just relying on the talent of Josh Allen, but to find a way to maximize it. We were talking earlier in the season, I think it was in the preview before they went in against Seattle, that in the start of the year they looked a bit up and down, weren't quite sure what their scheme was, weren't quite sure whether they were fully able to maximize what they could get out of the run game, weren't quite sure what kind of relationships that the Bills are having, or that Josh Allen was having, with his wide receivers. None of that is the case now. The Josh Allen and the Bills have built steam, they have built consistency, they're playing with a good defense, they're playing with confidence, and Josh Allen himself is pulling out some pretty amazing stuff. I think he's sort of the first person that I can think of who passed for a touchdown, ran for a touchdown, and received a touchdown all in the same game. If you haven't seen the play where Josh Allen receives a lateral and runs into the end zone, watch it. Very rare you see NFL stats where somebody who has been the target of 0 passes, whose official stats is he receives 0 passes, but has 7 receiving yards and a touchdown. That is just what Josh Allen does. And this is a typical kind of snow game, Noel, where we know that Buffalo tend to thrive in. San Francisco came in, couldn't quite get things going on the ground. But I think as much as we all talk about Josh Allen, and look, he was able to complete 13 and 17 passes he threw last night, throw a couple of touchdowns, run in that extra one, as I said, you have to say it's not just about him, as is sometimes the case when it comes to the quarterback play in a couple of teams. That it's very often reliant on the talents of one man. And look, you take Josh Allen out of that Buffalo offense, they ain't going far. But you look at what the rushing attack was able to do last night in the snow. James Cook is playing well. Ray Davis is playing well. In receivers, that that the Bills have players to work with. They have a defense to work with. They've already topped the AFC East. Nice little cakewalk for them there. They're going to the playoffs. I think out of all the years in this Bills, not dynasty, but in this Bills era with Josh Allen in place, this is probably the most serious contender they have looked. And that's kind of unusual to say considering where they were at this time last year. Sure, they managed to pull up a run in the end of the year, but they got rid of their offensive coordinator. Things seemed all over the place in terms of the actual fundamentals of the football team. There was even questions about whether Sean McDermott will be remaining in the job. Those questions didn't go away, even as far as late September this year. You have to say now the way they're playing, the way they dismantle the Chiefs, the way that every game they go into, there's a swagger, there's confidence, and they have Josh Allen playing lights out football. They are looking serious contenders. Your only other question, though, is how much they will take their foot off the gas now that they have already sealed their playoff spot with, I think, 4 games to go.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting, and that's a great question, Shane. They've qualified so early. Sometimes you wonder if that's too soon for a team. Maybe, as you say, they take the foot off the gas and they slow it down a bit. But you just get the feeling that this quarterback won't let that happen. I mean, you mentioned everything this Bills team have done. You look at the results, and they've been phenomenal this season, especially because I think some people had question marks coming into it. But for me, it all does come back on this quarterback. I mean, when you look at receiving yards after a game, there's probably 7 or 8 people who caught a pass. Nobody has amazing stats, but everybody is chipping in and doing the job. And that's this quarterback bringing them in. Then you mentioned the run game. Obviously, you have Cook there is having a great season. You mentioned Davis in there as well. But again, you'll have Josh Allen in there putting up the yards on the ground. So he kind of has his fingerprints all over this offense. But the way it's working, I don't think anybody saw it going the way it did. You mentioned the change in offensive coordinator last year with Joe Brady coming in, and things just from there seem to really have been put in place to let this offense spread the ball out, as I say, and balance between run and pass. And look, again, they go up against the 49ers team yesterday, who are having a lot of trouble this year. We know we've talked about it a number of times. They're having terrible trouble when it comes to injuries. There was another terrible injury last night to McCaffrey, which really could seal the fate for this football team. They've just had a tough time. Head coach is just having a tough time there at the moment, Shanahan. It's just things don't seem to be clicking for this team. And a Bills team at home in the snow absolutely took advantage of this. They dominated this game. You mentioned Josh Allen and those crazy stats of passing, running, and receiving a touchdown on the night. And that's just the way the season has gone. And the 49ers, just unfortunately for them, with everything that's come into the season coming together, really didn't have what it took to go into Buffalo and challenge Josh Allen and this team. And it will be interesting now, as you say, just to see as the season goes on now, what way they do go. But I think this quarterback won't let up. I think you watch him. I think he's the far away MVP candidate so far at this stage, and I think he'll keep pushing for that. And I love this team because, as I say, there's no one superstar outside of him on the receiving core or as a rushing back really, or running back, but they're just all playing together and they're all playing for this quarterback. And long may it continue, because I definitely didn't have them going this well this season.
Brian, when we look at the other side of the ball then in that Sunday white football, I guess as it was in the snow, San Francisco obviously played in the Super Bowl last year. They've been one of the better teams in the NFC for the last couple of seasons. There's a really big drop-off here. Christian McCaffrey obviously being injured for the second time this season probably doesn't help their case now. It seems like things are becoming increasingly difficult. Their only route to winning the championship will be, or even not even winning the championship, to topping the division, to making the playoffs will be in topping the division. Considering that they need to find some way to leapfrog a Cardinals and Rams teams who are performing well enough, and a Seahawks team who are now sitting on top of the division, there probably isn't much steam, and there probably needs to be a big kind of post-mortem now in San Francisco. And it's unusual now that after all the talk about Brock Purdy and how he's managed to build his way into this team, build his way into the system in San Francisco, whether he actually is the right man for the long-term future. People are already questioning whether Brock Purdy has reached his peak. Maybe it's a little bit reactionary to be talking like that at the moment, but it's certainly the fact that the conversation is even creeping in. It's probably not a good sign for the way the San Francisco will be playing as a whole.
I think that's a bonkers conversation. I think the narrative is all wrong because, in fact, what I would have said is, if anything, we've probably kind of realised how good of a quarterback he actually has been this year, because he's played in some games, even games in which they've lost, and he's been the standout player for them. He's kept them alive in many a game, and I don't think you can put it down on him this season. I think this team have struggled continuously with injuries over the course of the season. Like McCaffrey's been rushed back essentially to try give them the spark that they needed for the season, and they struggled against the Bucs. They lose the following week to the Seahawks. They lose. They were like, I don't think anybody ever really gets an opportunity going into this game last night. I think everyone had a kind of a feeling it would be a convincing win for the Bills, and they kind of played out that way. I was just looking at the schedule in which the games in which they got ahead of them. They got the Lions, they got the Bears this weekend, which won't be an easy task. The Bears will come with their game plan of how they can win the game. Obviously, the first game since the change in head coach, probably another spark or jump on top of another jump where we saw offensively over the course of the last few weeks. And then they've got the Dolphins, they've got the Lions, they've got to play the Cardinals. I'm thinking, unfortunately for this team, it's just too much of an ask, and it's not like they're only chasing one team within the division. I mean, the Rams have got back on track yesterday with a victory in New Orleans. The Cardinals, okay, they lost, but they lost in a manner in which was, you'd be comfortable enough as a Cardinals fan that they're going in the right direction. And they're going to play at home to the Seahawks this weekend. It's not against the rounds of possibility they flip the results and beat the Seahawks this weekend. If the Seahawks are to win this weekend, I think, having been 2 games back on the Seahawks with very few games left, I think ultimately they're going to come up short. I just don't think there's too much needs to happen for this team. They need to get right themselves, go on a massive run, and they need a lot of things to happen within the division. And it's not a case of one team. As I said, the Rams, the Cardinals, the Seahawks, they're all well within their rights of thinking they have a great opportunity to win the division. It's just too much. And there's players there. I know Kieran has discussed previously this is the window, and we might see players move on. I'm not entirely sure that is the case, but there may be some off or coaching changes, not necessarily head coach, but I think things haven't worked from this season. Defensive coordinator changes haven't worked. Offensively, it's been a bit stale. I think things have to be looked at there, but it's going to be one of those weird off seasons in San Francisco because they're so used to success over the last decade, and it doesn't necessarily mean they've won Super Bowls, but they've been consistently at the playoffs, consistently at the dance in terms of going to the Super Bowl, and that's not going to be the case this year come January.
No, one of the games that myself and Brian not glossed over, but didn't go into too much detail last night was the matchup between the Jets and the Seahawks. Interesting point from the Seahawks point of view is the fact that they managed to come back from being 21-7 down to win this game by 26 points to 21. Bit of a crazy game. Managed to, I think, benefit from the fact that Aaron Rodgers isn't what he used to be. The further he got onto the second half, the less impressive he looked. It'll be more interesting to see how much entertainment he can bring to the Jets affair this coming Sunday. But from the Seahawks point of view, as Brian alluded to there, they have a big matchup now against the Cardinals. Second time in 3 weeks they're playing against them. They're playing in Arizona. And the rest of their seasons has to see them play at home to the Packers, at home to the Vikings, away to the Bears, and away to the Rams. That's not easy at all. And as much as we talk about the fact that they are definitely in pole position in that division, things can change in the NFC West very quickly. The fact that they let themselves go 21-7 down in the first place against the Jets probably doesn't scream to me like a team who can take control when they really need to. Now, there was, I think it was a 99-yard kick return as part of that. It wasn't all about defense or an offense. Special teams played its part in this game. It was one of those crazy type games that I think we quite often see in MetLife Stadium. But when you're reading what the Seahawks can do, and look, they're on top of the division for a reason. They've played well. Geno Smith and wide receivers are connecting well. What way do you read the Seahawks now? Do you think that they are really strong enough and properly hitting their stride coming into that tough gauntlet of games?
Yeah, I think at the moment they're doing what they need to do to get results in an NFC West, which is, as you say, topsy-turvy. It doesn't take much at the moment, it feels like, to kind of jump to the top of the division. But I still have questions on the Seahawks. There's still a new regime in there. I have questions on Geno Smith. I mean, he can be lethal and he can really hurt teams when he's on form, but I still think he has it in him to make mistakes. Defense, I do think that McDonald defense is starting to take shape the way they had hoped. I think Smith and Jigba is starting to kind of look good on offense. So they have opportunities, they have players there, and they have the talent to win this division, given how it's kind of, going back and forth between certain teams and how tight it is. But I just don't know yet on the Seahawks. I do like them. I do think they'll be thereabouts for the division, but I haven't got a full grasp yet It's what I'm trying to say on the Seahawks team. They definitely have the talent in there to do it, but I just don't know if there's enough consistency. But then, as you say, with the whole NFC West itself, there doesn't seem to be for any team. So it's really there for someone, if they can get that form together, to make a run and to really take control of the division. Because I fear for the 49ers now. I always thought if they were a game or two behind, they're the 49ers. They have the talent. They'll push on and they'll take it when they need to. But I don't see that happening now. Too many injuries, too much negativity there. So yeah, I mean, the Seahawks have the talent to do it. So do the Cardinals, to be honest. The Cardinals, I think, have an impressive offense. So we're just going to see now if the Seahawks team, I mean, they showed a lot of fight yesterday coming back. As you say, a crazy game. You've got that big Leonard Williams interception return for 6. You've got crazy fumbles on kick returns. And just the whole game just felt a bit comical. And you feel like most other teams, bar the Jets, may have been able to hang on. But this Jets team, we've talked about them, they have their own issues. So yeah, look, the Seahawks have talent there. They have a good head coach who is obviously still learning on the job. I just don't know yet. I think they could be saved by a division that in itself has a lot of question marks. So we'll just see how they go. But as you say, there's a tough run in. So that will be it'll be a big few weeks for them now to see if they can actually push on and continue to develop.
Yeah, the idea of the Seahawks being saved by the division is a very interesting point. The Bills definitely don't really have anybody chasing in their division as much as we thought that the Jets would be chasing. It's funny, actually, because Kieran is usually the one on here who's finding ways to talk us through all the Jets issues, and much like Kieran's technology, which is malfunctioning tonight, which is unfortunate. The Jets defense has managed to malfunction in many key moments, and despite the fact that Quincy Williams individually had a very good game last night, Brian, the Jets defense, which is supposedly the rock on which the Aaron Rodgers project was built, did not cover themselves in much glory.
I would feel for the Jets defense yesterday because you have a team that scores on their first 3 drives of the game and looked like they were playing lights out football, and Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers had that connection back. And I know even on our social channel we kind of mentioned the fact that they looked like they were back in tandem, and the connection was like what we saw in the old days in Green Bay. And you think this team are going to keep mounting up the points. They would have 21 points very early, and then they have 8 consecutive drives and they don't score again. You've got a team that loses for the first time since 1998 against 2 quarterbacks in a season that they selected in the first round, in Geno Smith and Sam Darnold. You have your former first round pick in Williams being the first player, the player who has the longest touchdown for a defensive tackle in NFL history. And where did he do it? In his former hunting ground. Bear in mind, he also played for the Giants as well. So, look, Leonard Williams is a big cat and he's a great player. But this game was there for the Jets yesterday. Aaron Rodgers, for me, looked a little bit better yesterday over the course of the game compared to what we saw recently. But again, if you watch his press conference yesterday, it was like being back in Green Bay to a certain extent. He was asked questions along the lines of, but you're supposed to be fully healthy now. You're not carrying any injuries. Why did you play in the manner in which you did in the second half? And he quickly brushed the question aside and started playing hocus pocus and putting it on the other players within the offense that when other offensive players make mistakes, somehow it's still my fault. He's trying to get away from anything ever being Aaron Rodgers' fault. We're back to that kind of circus again. I think it's inevitably coming to the end for Aaron Rodgers in New York. I think the Jets I'll be happy to see the back of him. And I saw a great article today in which someone suggested this is what Green Bay wanted rid of. They wanted rid of the disturbance of Aaron Rodgers. They wanted to move on, have a fresh start, and didn't want to move with that continued disturbance in the organization. And I think the Jets over the course of the last 2 years are very much seeing what he can do to an organization. Not necessarily that he's dismantled them from the top down, but they've lost the head coach. They've the offensive coordinator, the defensive coordinator, like everything has changed so much and has evolved. We've had a situation where the owners wanted to bench him over the course of the season. They bring in an interim head coach that can't win a game. It's a complete and utter mess for this team. And they're kind of back to square one because inevitably he's going to go. They're going to bring in a new GM, a new head coach. They're going to have to find their quarterback in the future. They're back in that sweepstakes again. Did they reach on a quarterback? Does any coach want to go there? I think Pete Carroll has been linked. I think Pete Carroll actually would be probably for me the ideal candidate. I think he could go in there and handle the situation of he has kind of the magnitude of a head coach that understands how to manage the pressure of the media circus. He's been to New York, he's been to Boston previously, and he's Seattle in itself is probably a tough environment at times. I think he's an ideal candidate, but whether he really wants to go there and take on a job like that at his age is a is a different situation. I think they might find they might have to select a head coach down the pecking order for the next move, because there's a lot of work needed, and it's a tough ask in New York, especially with the pressure that comes with that job.
I can't imagine Pete Carroll being the great kind of West Coast cool guy and all the kind of vibes he emanates, and really making the move to MetLife Stadium. I don't quite see it. And not to hark too much back to his time in New England, but that was moderately successful, but not great. He was he wasn't the candidate that the Patriots wanted anyway. So I guess that was the difference.
He didn't ownership at the time, Shay. He didn't suit ownership at the time. What he would have to do was go in there and say to Woody Johnson, I run the show here and allow me to run the show. And I kind of Belichick mode, where Belichick for a long time was allowed to do whatever he wanted, until Kraft realized, I don't like what he's doing. I want to move things in a different manner. And he didn't like that.
But you know full well that if Pete Carroll goes in and wants to do a Belichick on it, obviously, so septuagenarian wants to come in, all anybody in New York is going to say, well, what the Jets really wanted was Belichick, but they can't do that because that bridge was burned 20 years ago. So there's a narrative kind of already taken out from under his rug anyway. I don't know. It's an interesting one. And look, the Jets will always be a team that bring up talking points.
I'll have one final point in that. Pete Carroll in his own way can point to winning a Super Bowl, can point to being a play away from winning a second Super Bowl if he had selected the right play and given the ball to Marshawn Lynch. But over the course of about 10, 15 years in Seattle, how many playoff seasons did he have? How many times did he come close? And I think ultimately in the end, sometimes it's the right time to move on. They made that decision. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion he won't come back coaching. I think he'd be very keen to get back into the league. If it's not New York, I know we're going off the tangent here. If it's not New York, I think there'll be many a team looking to get him this offseason.
Maybe even Las Vegas, and it's probably leads nicely into my next point. The Raiders very nearly made it a silver on Black Friday when they played against the Kansas City Chiefs. This is a game where Aidan O'Connell outpassed Patrick Mahomes by about 40 yards, 340 yards, completed a higher percentage of his passes than Patrick Mahomes did. Raiders were 17-16 up in early parts of the fourth quarter. So when you see those stats, you see the fact that an opposition quarterback is playing well, the fact that the Raiders managed to get a lead, the fact that it's much closer than everybody's expecting, because I think this is a 10-point spread in favor of the Chiefs. Looking at this game, the Chiefs managed to find some way to win by about 2 points. And sure enough, final score, 19-17. This feels like such a rerun of last year. Only last year it was worse because the Chiefs were actually losing games. Whereas this year, no, the Chiefs keep winning games by maybe 2 points. The Bills went to beat them. But surely now, by the time we get into the playoffs, that someone's got to give this Chiefs team a kicking. Because outside of the defense and flashes from Patrick Mahomes and flashes from individual players and individual moments, which don't always come together in a symphony of football in the way that we've come accustomed to watching from Patrick Mahomes' offenses before Steve Spag's defense became the real rock of this team. Surely now, this is going to be the year someone's going to take them out in early rounds of playoffs, because there's been too many of these games against teams that should be beating. Like the Panthers should have beat them last week. The Raiders should have beat them on Black Friday. The Bengals should have beat them earlier in the season. There's a couple of other games that they should have lost here as well. Surely now this is the year that the Chiefs get taken out. No? Am I going mad?
It really feels like Groundhog Day when you come to talking about the Chiefs this every week, doesn't it? It feels like the same game with a different opposition. They just seem to do what they need to do. Mahomes will make that, you won't have statistically that big day, but he'll make that one play that just says, yeah, this is Patrick Mahomes. I don't know, Shane. There's just two schools of thought to it. Obviously, there's the one that, they're not playing in full gear. They know what they're doing. They're just doing enough to coast and to win. And, when it comes to playoffs, this is where they thrive and they're ready to go. And the other one is they're being very lucky at the moment. They're just about getting away with games. And as you say, when they hit the playoffs, someone's going to take advantage of that. For me, I'm the former, but still week in, week out, I get a little bit more niggle and doubt just because can you keep doing this week in, week out and get away with it? Now, I know we've questioned the Chiefs over the last couple of years and they've gone on each time to win a Super Bowl. But for me, it's one of those things now where it does start to kind of niggle me a little bit, but I still think this is a team that are doing what they do best. They're going out there. They have one of the best quarterbacks in the history of the game. They have one of the best head coaches in the history of the game. And these two guys together are just doing what they need to do to win games, to get themselves into the playoffs. There'll be a battle now between themselves and the Bills for that number 1 seed. But I think when this Chiefs team hits the playoffs, I don't think they'll be worried about that. I think they'll be ready to go. I just think this is what they do. As a Chiefs fan, it must be some roller coaster. On one hand, you're delighted your team's winning, and on the other hand, you must just be like, "Is this it? Is this it?" But no, I think from so far, everything we've seen from this team over the last couple of years tells me they know what they're doing. They have the players to step up that gear when they need to. But it is getting harder and harder to stick by that belief as you watch it happen week in, week out against poor teams who you really think Super Bowl contenders should be putting away fairly easily.
Brian, help me make sense of the Chiefs.
I think it's crucial that they get the 1 seed. I know that, like last year, it was different. They didn't get the 1 seed and they went on a run after beating the Dolphins on that Saturday night snow game. But if they get home field advantage and they get the bye week, then they really are only talking about winning 2 home games to be in the Super Bowl. That's it. I say it's not a big ask. It's obviously it's a big task ahead of them, especially if they come up against the Bills. I wouldn't bet against it at all. I think there's a serious opportunity again from here. They've got some big games ahead of them. They got to play the Texans. Rory's rightly called it out. They got to play the Steelers on Christmas Day. Even Sunday Night Football is a huge game. They're at home against the Chargers. The Chargers need to get a stranglehold of this mental situation which they have against them. The Chargers were 10-0 up earlier in the season, and for all the plaudits we give this Chargers team, and I know we're going to come to it in terms of how many games they've won this season on the right end of tight score games, which they would have lost in the past. There still seems to be that kind of blocker when it comes to playing the Chiefs. They just can't overcome it, even in a situation where they had a 10-point lead at home. So how are they going to override that on Sunday and go into Arrowhead and win the game? What I would say about last Friday night's game is, and we have to be respectful of the Raiders. The Raiders continuously play this team tough. The Raiders played them earlier on the season. It took the 4th quarter before the Chiefs put them away, and that was led by a number of fumbles from Minshew before they finally got a handle of the game and won it. They never had a handle of the game on Friday. They certainly should have came out the wrong side, but it wasn't for a botch play at the end. The Raiders, in all likelihood, may have won the game. And bear in mind that the Raiders missed a number of field goals in the game as well. But this is what we spoke about earlier in the season with certain teams. No matter what the circumstances, Noel alluded to it last week, and we spoke about it on our Friday Week 13 preview show. The Bears always played the Lions tough, no matter what the circumstances. They did it last year. They beat them. They've nearly beat them in Detroit. Some teams just always play each other tough. And so as much as we're talking about the Chiefs downplaying certain teams, I think we have to acknowledge the Raiders played really well on Friday night. But you're still asking me who I think will win Sunday Night Football. I think the Chiefs will beat the Chargers on Sunday.
Well, certainly be interesting. Well, I guess we don't want to jump ahead to Week 14 too early. Still plenty of Week 13 action to talk about, including at what position the Steelers are in terms of racing for that AFC number 1 spot. But we're going to do that just after this break. Yes, sir. Welcome back to the Irish NFL show as we are reviewing all of the Week 13 action. That break brought to you there by Buscus on the Ball. Most of it is the home to Red Zone as well as many watch parties. But this Sunday, it is the home to the first official New York Jets watch party being held in Ireland. Tickets for that and details are available on our social media and on our website. And you can find, if you Google New York Jets watch party Dublin, I'm sure you'll find it there. We will be there hoping to see a good match up between the Jets and the Dolphins in the race for the AFC wildcard spot, certainly from the Dolphins' point of view, and for the Jets. Yeah, it's the AFC East. We all love beating our rivals, and they will definitely be up for that game. When it comes to the AFC race then, Noel, we talk about the Steelers. Myself and Brian ran through briefly last night the fact that they were in the game against the Bengals. They ran up huge numbers, and the Bengals still ended up managing to score a lot of points. But this is a game where Russell Wilson passed for 414 yards, 3 touchdowns. You saw good performance from George Pickens, good rushing performance from Najee Harris. They got scores early. They took control of the game early. The defense showed out pretty strong in situational moments in the early parts of the game. They ended up building up a quite sizable 41-24 lead. The further they got into the game, the better they were. I know the Bengals maybe gave themselves a bit of a chance later on. But in any game, you're putting up 520 total yards. And who would have thought we would actually see this from the Steelers this time last year when we talk about the post-Matt Canada era and Kenny Pickett and the fact that the Steelers always managed to grind out victories that were, 17 points to 13 or something like that. If they're playing against teams scoring 38 points and they're scoring 44, this is a very different kind of Steelers team that we're being used to the last couple of years. We used to seeing Mike Tomlin find a way to get it over the line. We used to seeing the Steelers make the playoffs. We expect them to not do well once they get into the playoffs. But as was the case last year when the Bills ended up beating them in the first round of the postseason, I think this is a very different situation this time, though, and the Steelers are in a really good chance to top the AFC here. They're sitting at 9-3. If they win out the rest of the games now, there's not an easy slate of games to come. That's played against the Browns, which is always difficult when you play against AFC North teams. They have to travel to play against the Eagles, which, as we mentioned earlier in the show, are a very difficult opponent. Travel to play the Ravens, play at home to the Steelers on Christmas Day, which is absolute box office watching, before facing the Bengals again. Tough run to the season, but the way the Steelers are playing, you really would not count against them.
Absolutely. I mean, look, this is the most un-Steeler-like performance I've ever seen, and probably an un-AFC North-like game we've ever seen. The back and forth in this game was phenomenal. I mean, I know we've all talked about this Bengals offense and the Steelers defense, and for me, that was a big key. I think the Steelers defense stood up and made the big plays when they needed to. Although when you look at the scoreline, the Bengals offense still put up a lot of points. And unfortunately for the Bengals, there's been nothing wrong with their offense this season. It's being defensive wise. But on this Steelers team, I mean, you obviously think defense first, but you mentioned it there. This offense has just been doing what it needs to do. Now, at times, it just does enough. Yesterday, it went all out. Russell Wilson had a fantastic game. George Pickens had a great game, bar some mental errors where he needs to kind of rein that in. There are certain games that can come back to bite you. But look, this is a Steelers team. I've said it before, that has a balance on both sides of the ball now for me. You have an experienced coach in Tomlinson who hasn't had a losing record. These guys know how to win games. They've been doing so well in this division. Obviously, they have other results, like we talked about the Ravens dropping some unsurprising games, which has given the Steelers a real boost in terms of taking this division. And yeah, Rory's right there when he mentioned earlier, like they're not out of the number one seed contention at all. They are absolutely on form to challenge for that spot. But you mentioned the run in, and I think they're good enough to win more games than they're losing that run in. But it is going to be a tough run in, and that defense will be questioned during that run in. And this offense will need to keep up the consistency they've been showing in scoring enough points to benefit from such a strong defense. But look, you look at yesterday, they were up against a division rival. No matter what the Bengals have or haven't done this season in terms of record, they still have one of the most potent offenses in the NFL as a whole. And this, as I say, the Steelers defense did a job it needed to do, and the offense went out there and ran riot. And they get to the record they're at now on top of this division. It's in their own hands to take their fate going forward. And again, I think they will win this division, and it will be interesting to see how far they can push the Bills and the Chiefs, who I think will be the two favourites for that number one spot. But the Steelers absolutely have what it takes to push them and see how far that can go.
Switching over to the NFC North now, Brian, the Vikings coming away with the victory. As I mentioned last night, it's always a good sign when you find ways to win games you probably should have lost. But I was actually looking back at this matchup against the Cardinals, a game that the Vikings came back to win. And actually, they probably got a couple of good bounces of the ball. And I think the Cardinals also found ways to lose this one as well. You look at some situational coaching decisions that was made by Arizona and some penalties. I think, so based on some stats I see here, that the Cardinals gave up 96 yards in penalties, which the Vikings didn't give up too many penalties at all. The Cardinals missed a kick at some point, which definitely would help to put themselves over. But in fairness to the Vikings, when they had the chance, and considering how weak their offense was in the first half, they only got 5 first downs and 75 yards in all of the first half. That's not a good performance at all. And it's something I say consistently on the show, is that it's very difficult to win games when you only play one good half of football. The Vikings played one good half of football last night. The second half, they managed to build their way back in. And, there's definitely 2 talking points coming out of this. I think the Cardinals didn't have the red zone efficiency, particularly in the red zone, that they were not good enough in striking. And this is a similar problem we've actually seen before from the Cardinals. When they played against the Seahawks, they had much better numbers in terms of total yards, being able to get the ball down the field, their passing efficiency, their running efficiency, their ball control. But when it came to the red zone, they just couldn't get it done. You look at what the Vikings have been able to do, is whenever they get the chance, they're able to convert. They don't need to play a better game of football. They just need to be given the right chance, and they will find a way to put it in. And that's the difference between a team that's in the hunt for the playoffs and a team which is playing some of the best football in the league.
Yeah, it's a game in which the Cardinals will feel they let slip. The numbers aren't, the statistics aren't reflective of a game which was deserving of a Vikings victory. You touched on there some long drives in which resulted in field goals, as opposed to the inconsistencies in the red zone, and we touched on it in the instant reaction last night. For me, the key and the biggest part of the game was 4 or 5 minutes to go, and the Cardinals run again a lovely methodical drive, and they get into the red zone and they can't strike it in. They can't get the touchdown, which would have put them up by with a 2-score lead. And within that drive, there's a penalty on Kyler Murray, which pulled them back 15 yards, which put them in a very difficult situation where they were never going to be in a position to get a touchdown. It was 3rd and goal from a 25, 30-yard line, and they just were happy to pull back some yards and essentially kick the field goal. Intentional grounding was the call on that drive. So having drove down and looked like they were going to put the game away, frustrating. And then when you leave yourself open to 6 points, and we speak about it time and time again in the NFL, you leave a team doesn't play well over the course of 2.5 quarters, but you got players such as Jefferson and Hawkinson, who's been a huge find in terms of coming back from injury over the course of the last 2 weeks, and you're giving this team an opportunity to go down and a late score. And there were so many poor plays on the Vikings team offensively yesterday. They never got it going for large parts. Aaron Jones struggled, and then I suppose by the grace of God, he gets the winning touchdown, and he rights a lot of the wrongs for him over the course of the game. Look, this is a Vikings team that we continuously speak about. Kevin O'Connell as a great head coach, and you're talking about teams there who have a very similar feel and probably record to previous years, but there's a different vibe about it. There's a different vibe to this team. 2 years ago, they were winning games, getting over the line in games that they should have lost. This year, they're coming back in games where it kind of shows the stellar performance and toughness that this team has been created with a head coach. And it's only reflective if you take time out to watch Kevin O'Connell's post-game locker room celebration. Again, he talks about how they win as a team, and that right now, a team that's only has 2 losses, and they're going to, as I said on last night's show, they've got Thursday night ahead of them with the Packers and the Lions going against each other. One of them is going to knock each other off. It's a big week for the Vikings, and they've got the Falcons coming to town. Kirk Cousins, their old former quarterback. There's so many storylines around that game. But it could be a big week for the Vikings. If they were to win that game on the back of Thursday night's result, it'd be a huge piece. And right now, they look like a team that could go to the playoffs and make waves.
Kirk Cousins is definitely the person who will be taking a lot of headlines in Minnesota this week, Noel. But it's interesting that he's making a lot of headlines for the wrong reason for his performance last night as an Atlanta Falcon. He threw 4 interceptions despite, what was relatively strong otherwise. I think he showed himself to be quite capable. He attempted 39 passes, completed 24, then 245 yards. The offense managed to keep moving, but 4 very poor decisions when it came to leaving himself open to being picked off. 2 of them in particular, one in the red zone and one inside his own half, were very, very soft. Against a Chargers team who scored 17 points, 1 touchdown, who, look, they managed to get the victory. And we've said this so many times with the Chargers in years past, that they lose games they should be winning. This time they won a game they probably should have lost. You look at the total yardage that both teams put down. Atlanta put down 350 yards. The Chargers only put down 187 in total. And it's funny that even when you're looking at who are the creative players on the offense of the Chargers, Justin Herbert passed for 147 yards. Okay, it's not the worst in the world, but 117 of those was to Ladd McConkey, who had an excellent game and managed to really get himself open. And it's quite clear that he's definitely the WR1 for Herbert at the moment, where he's been playing for the last couple of weeks. But considering the challenges ahead for the Chargers in particular, and I'm sure we'll come back to the race for the NFC South at some point. The next game we will be talking about is the one between the Bucs and the Panthers. But when we look in the AFC West and we look at what the challenge the Chargers have ahead of them, of course they still want to try and keep themselves, if not in the hunt for the AFC West, at least on top of that pile for the wild cards, because then they share a division with the Broncos, who are currently sitting in that 7th spot. They have to play away to the Chiefs, home to the Bucs, home to the Broncos, away to the Patriots, and away to the Raiders. Now, on paper, the Chiefs is the only properly tough game there, especially because it's a Sunday night game, it's in Arrowhead, all the pressure's on. As much as I've said earlier about the way that the Chiefs don't seem to shut down games, that's still a very, very tough ask for the Chargers. Considering they're coming off a game here when they didn't light it up against a Falcons team who you probably have no right to be stamping their authority on any aspect of what the Chargers be able to put up here. How much confidence do you have in the Chargers, considering that run of games, considering the way they've been playing well? In fairness to their defense, we all know their defense is the best defense in the league. There's a reason they got 4 interceptions. But can they be similar to the Chiefs in that use a strong defense and an offense that can have its moments and manage to build into the playoffs? Is that something that Harbaugh could potentially cook up?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, they have players on offense. Justin Herbert can change games, who can win games for you. But I still feel this offense is going to be a bit up and down. Obviously, they can run the ball as well when they need to, and Herbert's been coming into it a bit more. But this is built on a defense. We saw it there the other day. The 4 interceptions, as you say, one return for their only touchdown of the game, and they rode that defense this time. I mean, this game comes down to turnovers, and the Chargers won that turnover battle massively. I mean, in terms of first downs, they only had 10 first downs on the day compared to the Falcons 24. So sometimes you're going to get those games, and that's fine, especially for a Chargers team, which I think is ahead of schedule to where most people thought they would have been at this stage already. This was a team that, Harbaugh came in, and I think people had great hope for him as a head coach, but maybe thought it was a very difficult job there and it might take a bit of time to get going. I mean, they've done a fantastic job to get the team to where they are at this moment in time. So, look, who knows? That defense can step up. They have that kind of run in. They're capable of winning the majority of those games, and they've already set themselves up in a great position so far, pushing for a playoff spot. So they absolutely have a chance to do it. I do think their offense is going to have to be better than it was yesterday for some of those games. That's something. Or you feel that this team, even if they make the playoffs, could be a one and done. But then maybe the playoffs is such an achievement this year for this team. And then for the Falcons, I mean, this is what we worry about, this Falcons team. All the talent in the world on offense, but for some reason, sometimes it just doesn't click. And when you have a game yesterday like Kirk Cousins, I mean, I see the Michael Penix questions being asked there now because, when he has a bad game like that, I mean, it absolutely kills the offense when your quarterback does that because nobody else can really do anything outside of him. I know they have a good run game there with a good two-headed monster who can get the yards on the ground. But if your quarterback's playing like that, it's tough. It's tough days. And this is a Falcons team now that'll feel the pressure with the Buccaneers. At one point, they thought they might have that division or be in a very good position, but the Bucs are getting wins where they need to, and that's going to be a very interesting division. And again, the Chargers just keep doing what they're doing. They play on defense like that. They hope Justin Herbert can make things happen on offense. And if that happens, then yeah, this is a team that why not go to the playoffs? They're challenging another team people question coming in, the Broncos, and it's going to be interesting to see how that all pans out. But I think this Chargers team have the confidence now at the moment to push on and make that playoff spot. But it will be difficult for them. And I say that offense does need to not have too many games like last night.
Brian, we were recording last night. I have to say, one eye one eye of mine was on the matchup between the Panthers and the Buccaneers, and I have to say I was rooting for the Panthers. Thank God they're alive again. Isn't it much better for the league when there isn't one team who is just absolute dirt? And they're playing much better now, and I thought they had the chance to go and win the game. Adam Thielen gets the go-ahead touchdown, 23 points up. There was a couple of other opportunities that the Panthers had near the end of the game. But in fairness to the Buccaneers, they got it together. I think the defense in particular managed to stand up in key moments, both at the end of the fourth quarter and in overtime. It's a big one for the Buccaneers in the context of their challenge for the NFC South. But I'm just happy to see the Panthers are a team that can at least look like they can win games.
Well, they're entertaining to watch. I disagree with you. I wanted the Bucs to win because I was one of the people who had invested some of my hard-earned cash in the in our partner Quimet's account with the Bucs to win, along with a few other teams. But this game looked like it was dead and buried when the Bucs drove down to the 3-yard line and they needed 1 yard to get a first down. Essentially, would have killed off the game because the clock would have continued to run. And fair play to the Panthers defense, they stepped up and they made him kick a field goal, and that gave them that one last opportunity to go and have a game-winning drive. And you could argue they had the game-winning drive. They did what they had to do. Bryce Young drove them down the field. Another very efficient performance from him yesterday. Efficient in the sense of he's not doing stupid things with the ball like we saw earlier on in the season with needless interceptions where he's scrambling around. I think he's acknowledged and matured a little bit now that he recognised when the play's not there for him just to throw it out of bounds, take the check down, don't try to do the stellar pass on his own. He had another good game yesterday. The touchdown to Thielen was fantastic, and anybody who was watching late into the 12 o'clock hour last night saw a Thielen catch, which this is supposed to be Adam Thielen that was washed up, and he's springing catches like that, which looked like it was going to be the game-winning catch, and then literally on the next play, the resulting play, they fumbled the ball, and the Bucs recovered. The Bucs got out there last night they were fortunate to get away with that victory, but this is a Bucs team that know how to get these wins now. And this is the thing with Noel's reflecting on there, where you're talking about a Falcons team that are a couple of weeks ago were 2 or 3 games ahead in this division, had beaten the Bucs twice, and now they're neck and neck at 6-6. And you're looking at a team that the Bucs, who have the Raiders coming into town this weekend, and you've got a Falcons team traveling into Minnesota. The division is quickly turning, and the Bucs schedule does look a bit lighter on paper compared to the Falcons. And it looks to me like a team that will go and win this division. My only concern is Baker Mayfield, as well as he's playing, he finds himself getting the injuries because he just won't give up on the play. And it's a frustrating thing if you're a Bucs fan because he's got all the attributes. He's playing really well this season, but there's just been a number of times this season where he won't give up on the play. And as much as you love to see that, sometimes you need a head coach or an offensive coordinator to just kind of say, the play's not there, do the sensible thing, because he ended up coming off injured last night, went into the blue tent, came back in. It was 3rd and 1. You would think the head coach or the offensive coordinator would call a run play to settle him down and get the first down. They didn't. They allowed him to throw it, and he was picked off immediately. That type of stuff is careless in my eyes. But they got over the line. It wasn't the best performance. Panthers are going in the right direction. I think they're all playing for the head coach, but they're entertaining. But they're not going to win many more games, Shane.
I couldn't believe it when that fumble happened in near the end there. By the way, because I was just thinking, all I had to come on, just punch the run up. And I'm not. Don't any Buccaneers fans think I wanted them to lose or anything. There definitely isn't some kind of like ownership with Tom Brady thing happening here. I would just genuinely wanted to see the underdog go and get it, and I also may have staked some of my reputation on the Panthers winning that game as well. So, just to tie things up very, very quickly, Noel. The other team that was in the conversation for the NFC South was the New Orleans Saints. They were 6-0 up over the LA Rams in New Orleans last night. Ended up losing that game 21-14. They're now sitting at 4-6. Looks like they're probably out of the running, despite the fact that I think you look at some of the play they got for Derek Carr and Alvin Kamara, it showed good signs. But the problem is they're playing as a Rams team who, although they may not be playing on talent and lights out football, they are definitely riding high in belief.
Yeah, they are. Like this Rams team, they know how to win games. I mean, I still have question marks on them, but you know, they've had a tough kind of season in terms of injuries and stuff, and kind of issues like that. But they're starting to slowly now in the division again. We talked about earlier, that's there for for someone to reach out and grab. The Rams have the players, and you know, they're starting to win games the way they need to win games. You mentioned the Saints. Since they've made the change, they're 2-1 now. They've looked a much better team than the team that was there before Dennis Allen went. But still, I think part of that may be that new head coach bounce. They still have some really good players on offense, and you know, Marquez Valdez-Scantling seems to be popping up every week with a nice big touchdown, and Derek Carr has looked a lot better. But I think they're too far out now. I don't think you'll be seeing them going for a playoff spot. I think it is between the Falcons and the Bucs. And then, as I say, look, the Rams are in a division where they'll feel like the other two teams, or the other three teams, I suppose, if you include the 49ers, they'll feel like it's there to be grabbed. They have the offensive players to do it. Matthew Stafford, obviously an experienced quarterback, Super Bowl winner. McVay there as the head coach, they can scheme up ways to beat teams. And I think on defense, Jared Verse is really looking like a really top defensive player in the NFL. So it'll be interesting to keep an eye on the Rams. As I say, I still have question marks about them. I still am completely sold. But in terms of the Saints, I think they'll put up some exciting games every now and then. They have the players to make it look interesting and to make it fun. But I don't think there's enough there. I think we'll see how things go, and they just see out the season and what they do at the head coach position. And for me, the other two teams will be the two battling for that division.
I tell you, the excitement for this New York Jets watch party is in my head now, because I can already hear JETS, just end the show. And that is exactly what I will do right now. Thank you very much for listening to our review of Week 13 of action. Whereas we roll into Week 14, please keep an eye out on all of our channels for various content. We will be back live on Thursday night to preview all of the Week 14 games. But until then, thank you very much for taking your time out to listen to the Irish NFL Show.